Yo, what's up? So today I want to show you this brand new kick rack I made called the Divinity Techno Kick Generator. This rack has absolutely revolutionized the way I make peak time techno kicks. It's just so easy to use and it takes all the guesswork out of making these kicks. I get a consistent result every time, and that's exactly what I'm looking for when I'm writing a track. So in this video, I'm going to show you some of the features. I'll open it up, show you how it works, and then I'll show you some of my favorite ways to use it. So let's get into it. So let's listen to this little beat I made. It's nothing special, but it's just enough to just show you guys how the rack works. So let's start from the ground up. The Divinity Rack is an Ableton instrument, which means in order to use it, we're gonna have to make a new MIDI track, drag this rack onto the MIDI track, and just think of it like a sampler. So we're basically gonna use it the exact same way we would use a sampler. Drag it onto a MIDI track, you make a MIDI clip, and if we open up the MIDI clip, you can see I've punched in a bunch of notes at C3. So these are quarter notes at C3, which is the note that's gonna trigger the sampler at its correct pitch. So let's real quick solo the kick, and I'll just play it. Sounds great. Sounds super bassy, also super punch. It's just overall, it sounds great. So this rack works exactly the same as the kick builder method that I've explained previously in videos and TikToks and whatnot. If you haven't seen it, I'll leave a link to a video where I've explained how that process works. It'll be up at the top of the screen. So basically the kick builder method is a method where you take a bunch of individual samples that make up different parts of the techno kick and you stack them on top of each other. And the reason why it's super useful to make kicks using that method is because you can easily change individual parts of the techno kick without affecting the entire thing. So I made a little example down here just to visually show you how that works. And we also put out a pack called the Underworld Kick Builder Pack, which contains a bunch of samples like this. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description. But this is basically what it is. We have our mid punch, our low punch, our rumble, our top kick, and our gate effects. So if we listen to the mid punch, it's kind of like our character, a little bit of the transient. I think of it as just sort of like the knock of the kick. And then we have our low punch. And if you zoom in, we can see I actually have this slid back a little bit because I want the top kick and the mid punch to be the transient. And I want the low punch in there to just act as like a little extra sub if I need like a chest knock. And I sometimes move this around depending on where I like it. Then we have the rumble. This is like the reverb tail of the kick, but instead of using reverb and delay and just slamming it all together, I've made a bunch of like rumble layers that you can just easily drag and drop. Then we have our top kick. That's like the top end of the kick, the transient. Then we have our reverb gate. So if we play it together, it makes a techno kick and it sounds good. Usually I would process this and whatnot, but what I've done is I've combined that all into one Ableton rack. And this to me is a lot faster because I can use the macro knobs to switch those samples and pitch them up and slide them around and do all different things. I can also hit this random button to get random results every time. So it just speeds up the process so fast. It took me a really long time to make this, but I'm glad I got it to a point where I can give it to you guys because I just love the way it sounds. So if we open it up, you can see that we have those 5 layers. We have the mid punch, the low punch, low rumble, top kick, reverb gate. So let's look at the mid punch first. And just another thing real quick, I'm gonna open up this Vision 4X plugin, and this is gonna be our oscilloscope so we can see the waveform and what's happening in our kick. So let's solo the mid punch. And what we can do is we can take this M punch select knob, and if we turn this, it's gonna play different samples. So just like that, we can swap our mid punch sound. We also have a macro knob that will control the pitch of the mid punch. And then we have our volume, which will control the volume of the mid punch. And that's basically how the rack works. Every single layer has a selector knob where you can select the sample and a volume knob where you can control the volume of the sample. Not every knob has a pitch. We'll get into that, but let's move on to the low punch. If we solo that, you can hear the low punch. It's almost like a 909. It's very subby and knocky. This is great for like getting that chest punch in your kick. So we can select which sample we want. We can pitch it up and down. And we can lower the volume or raise the volume. But there's one additional macro for the low punch that I want to talk about, and that is called the low shift. So if you look on the low punch layer, we have this effect called align delay. And basically, as I drag this low shift macro up, you can see that the value of the align delay is turning up. And this is basically going to shift the low punch back. So if we look at our oscilloscope and press play, you can see that the low punch kick is moving forwards and backwards. Now, this is really handy because if we solo our mid punch and our low punch, and we'll just use these two as an example right now. As we shift the low punch kick back and forth, we get like a very different sound, and you can see that the phase is changing. So that's why I like to use this low shift and the low pitch. I'm always adjusting these knobs to make sure the phase is looking somewhat good and it just sounds great. So let's play around with the low pitch and the low shift real quick. You can see, you could do this forever, but I just wanted to kind of show you how that works. So let's move on to our next layer, and this is the rumble layer. So if we solo this, again, this is like the reverb tail. This is going to be that sub, and you can see on the oscilloscope, it's super messy. It's phasing all over the place, and that's pretty much just what like a reverb tail is. It's rumble. It's not really supposed to have like a ton of tonality. So we can use this macro knob to switch the rumble sample. And we can use this macro knob to adjust the pitch of the rumble. This is very useful because now you can control exactly like what frequency you want your reverb tail to be rumbling at. This to me is just much more useful, and you have much more control than if you did it in the traditional way, which is just like low passing reverb and delay and compressing it all together. And then the last adjustment we have for this is the rumble gain, which we can turn it up and down. Pretty self-explanatory there. So now let's take a look at the top kick. Works exactly the same as the previous three layers, except this one doesn't have a pitch control, and we can just turn it up and down. Now let's take a look at the reverb gate, and I'm gonna turn this up for now. You can already hear like that rhythm, and this is such a great layer to add to your kick because it gives that rhythm, it gives it character. I usually keep it pretty low because I like to tuck it into the background, but you can turn this up however much you want. And we can cycle through which reverb gate that we want too. So then we have two other macros we haven't talked about, and that's extra rumble and the limiter. For extra rumble, I'm just gonna solo the mid punch and the low punch so you can see on the oscilloscope exactly what it's doing. Just adds a little bit of reverb and delay, adds some rhythm, a little bit of gallop. It's always good to add that on top. I don't know, I just really like how it sounds. And then our limiter is just gonna be slamming everything into an Ableton limiter. And I really like boosting everything into the Ableton limiter. I just think it sounds so good. So that is how this kick rack works. So if we close it, I'm just gonna press play on this first preset. And that's what our kick looks like. So now that we're on the topic of presets, if you're not familiar with Ableton Instrument Rack presets, they're found on this left side, and all they are snapshots of macro knob positions. That's literally it. So if we press play on each one of these, we're gonna get different macro positions, and that's gonna give us a different kick sound. Let's press play, and this is gonna bring up our first kick preset. We can press play on kick 2. Different kick, just like that. It sounds so good. So there's 50 presets in there. They all sound so good. But if those 50 presets aren't enough for you, I love spamming this random button right here. You just get different results every time. It's endless. This is great for inspiration. I'm always using this when I'm writing tracks or starting to write tracks, just so I can quickly get an idea of which direction I want to go in. You can definitely add like processing after if you want, but I don't even really think it needs it. Like, it just sounds really good to me. So let's go back to kick 1 and we'll unsolo this kick so we can listen to the entire beat. And let's just start flipping through some of these presets and playing around with the rack so you can hear what it sounds like in context with the rest of the song. All right, so that is it for the overview of the Divinity Techno Kick Generator rack. This rack is absolutely insane. You definitely have to go check it out. Couple of quick notes. It's compatible with Ableton Live Suite 11.3.10 and above. And this rack is only out now exclusively a part of our Divinity all-in-one techno production suite. We just put out this production suite. It's absolutely massive. It comes with over 2,000 samples, loops, and presets, as well as the Apollo Masterclass we just dropped. So that's 58 lessons of a start-to-finish techno song, over 5.5 hours of video. It's extremely in-depth, so if you want to learn more about music production, definitely go check that out. This is all part of the Divinity all-in-one production suite. So that's out now on our site. I'll leave a link to that below in the description. But yeah, definitely go check it out, and thank you guys for watching.